but also making news today, the release of the monthly CPI numbers, a drop from 3.5% to 2.7%. Yesterday, when the Reserve Bank held the official cash rate steady, RBA Governor Michelle Bullock said this about inflation.
We will expect to see the cost of living relief come into play. And what that's going to do is that's going to lower energy prices. If tomorrow we get an inflation number which has got a 2 in front of it, so it's back in the band, that doesn't mean that we've got inflation under control. It doesn't mean that inflation is sustainably back within the band. It just means it's back there at the moment.
Well, despite the experts' warning yesterday, don't get ahead of yourself with a 2 in front, the Treasurer today couldn't keep a smile off his face.
The new inflation numbers for August showed that headline and underlying inflation both went down substantially. These are very welcome, very encouraging and very heartening numbers.
Not because of the government, more in spite of the government. To discuss this and more, I'm joined now by Sky News senior reporter Carolyn Marcus and the Daily Telegraph's James Willis. Well, welcome to you both, James. We'll start with inflation coming down this month. It is a good thing, but Labor seems to ignore the RBA's warning that it's the big energy handouts that are masking the true inflation figure, aren't they?
Yeah, and of course, Labor, and good evening to you, Peter, Labor desperate to get a rate cut before they head to the polls. That is crucial for any chance that they have of being re-elected with a majority. And I think at the moment, people are smart enough to realise, though, that the figures we've seen in the last 24 hours are driven by cheap petrol and also cheaper energy prices, which are the result of everyone from the richest Australian to the poorest Australian receiving a handout that will wash through their accounts. And as a result, they've said, geez, my power bill is cheaper this month. At the same time, though, and if you dig into the data, it might be good news on those two, but we've had price rises on fruit and veggies. We've had rises in rent, rises in services, and rises in insurance of 14% in the 12 months to August. So, sure, in one area, people are getting a little bit of a discount at the Bowser and also on their energy bills, but on a range of other services, it's far too high. And if it was well and truly where it should be, then we would have had a rate cut by now. But as the RBA Governor has said, the idea of a rate cut is still months away, highly unlikely, almost impossible by the end of this year. And so there's a lot of work to do once these energy discounts go away, which are very short term.
And the big takeout too in all of this, Caroline, is that people are desperate for their mortgage numbers to come down. We know it's about $5 billion in extra interest that we're all paying every month. I've got a mortgage like everybody else. And if you're not paying a mortgage, you're likely to be in the rental market, and they're all going up and up and up. So, you know, yes, it's good to have a little bit cheaper petrol and maybe you can cut back when you're at the supermarket, although I think people are pretty lean now. The problem with the mortgage is you've got to keep paying it or you lose your home, and that's what's killing Labor politically.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's reflected in all the polling recently, which is just showing support for the government absolutely plummeting, and voters continuing to nominate housing and cost of living as the main issues that they're concerned with. And as you say, how can cost of living be addressed and brought down if that huge chunk of your income or your pension that's going towards rent or mortgage repayments doesn't come down as well and isn't lessened? So, I mean, even though the headline inflation figure came down today within that range of 2 to 3% that the RBA had signalled it would need to inflation in order to cut interest rates, it doesn't mean that it's sustainably cut down, and the trimmed inflation rate is what economists say the RBA really is more interested in anyway, and that remains too high, above 3.4% anyway. So at this stage, it's way too early for the Treasurer to be popping champagne, or more likely sparkling, because who of any of us can afford the French stuff these days anyway? We're going to have to wait at least 18 months or 2 years to reach 2026, when the RBA is actually thinking that it is going to reach sustainably low enough levels.
James, there's politically stupid and then there's politically suicidal. I mean, Labor seems to think that only rich people have an investment flat, but I tell you, that's not the case, is it?
No, and if this is in any way driven by the Greens, it's absolutely ridiculous. We know the Greens' views on housing. They're blocking a lot of overdevelopment while calling for rental freezes and a range of other completely nutty policies. I think this is political suicide for Labor if they seriously go down this path. And the fact is, we have seen this already in this term of government where they said, oh, no, there'll be no changes to superannuation. Then the superannuation change was made. No changes to the stage 3 tax cut. Then we found out they were getting advice on that. Then they made that change. And we're hearing this again with negative gearing. I'm really, really grateful that you highlighted what is the biggest misconception with this policy, that people like Harry Triguboff are benefiting from it only. I mean, this is mum and dad investors that have put their life savings and their earnings into a second home, maybe a third home, but in most cases, just one other home, and as a result, get a tax break in return. I think this is a really dangerous one for the Prime Minister. There's more than 1 million people that benefit from it, and if he seriously goes down this path, then watch out, because the public and the voters, the backlash will be significant.